Hello, welcome to Unity tutorial number 3, Collectibles in UI. Okay, so uh, last time we did this key and the door. Collectibles are going to work in a very similar way. They're going to use the trigger. Okay, so for this tutorial, our collectibles are going to be some little blue cubes. Okay, and they're going to be really tiny, so I want to make the trigger a little bigger. So we're going to add a sphere trigger around our cubes, and when the player enters the trigger, uh, we're going to make the cube disappear, and we also need to keep track of how many cubes the player has collected. So to use this, we're going to have a collectible script, and we're going to have another script which is going to be invisible called a Collectible Manager. Okay, so we have our player. So the player is going to enter the trigger of this collectible. We're going to make the collectible disappear. We're going to tell the collectible manager that to add 1 to the number of collectibles collected. And then we're going to tell, from the collectible manager, we're going to tell the UI to update the display to show how many collectibles we've collected. Okay? And so UI stands for user interface. And basically what it means is it's your HP bar, it's your mini map, it's the buttons that pop up to tell you to press like the A button or the B button. It's your menus. It's all the stuff that isn't in the game but tells the user, the player, what's going on in the game. The invisible numbers they can't see, right? So if we didn't update the UI, we would just have kept track. We would just know that the player has picked up 1 collectible, but the player wouldn't have any way of, they would have to memorize how many they picked up. They wouldn't have a nice UI pop up telling them how many to pick up. So that's why the UI is important. So to remove the pressure from the player from memorizing how many of our cubes they've collected, okay? So, so let's go to Unity. And so the first thing I want to do is let's just create our collectible. So I'm going to go to create 3D object cube. I'm going to name it collectible. Okay. And oh, it's under the ground, so I'm just going to grab the green arrow, drag it up, let's move it over here. So the player will have to come over here to click the cube. I'm going to choose the scale tool, make it a little smaller. Select this, drop it down near the ground there. Great, so there is our collectible. Let's give it a color. Materials, right click or create material, and blue. Okay, and then oops, I didn't give blue a color, so I just dragged, so you can see blue is on our collectible. There's our collectible, and the material is blue, but I never updated blue, so I can click on blue here, click on this little color slot, change it to blue. You can also edit the material from inside the object that has it. So if I click on this triangle, it opens up the same, see this window? Very similar, or exactly the same as this window. So I can adjust the color. I want a little bit more green blue. There we go. So there's our little collectible. So now that we have the art, the visual element, we need to make our script. So go to scripts, create, C# script, collectible. So I'm going to open up collectible. And like with our key, we don't need any of this stuff. So we can get rid of start and update. I have an empty script. So just to make sure it's clear, we still have our public class, oops, I closed it. Our public class collectible mono behavior and its 2 curly brackets, and then inside those curly brackets is where everything's going to go. So let's add our on trigger enter method. And onTrigger enter needs that one argument, which is collider other. We have onTrigger enter with a collider called other. And let's make sure it's the player. So if other.gameObject.tag equals player, what? Well, we want the cube to disappear, so that's easy. We know how to do that. So we just say gameObject.setActive false. And by setting it false, it also prevents us from collecting it more than once. Now, the other thing we need to do is we need that collectible manager script. And that's going to keep track of our collectibles. So let's go back to Unity, create a new script, C# script called Collectible Manager. Okay? Open that up. So double click on it. So here's our Collectible Manager. So Collectible Manager also isn't going to need starting up. Okay? So let's give our Collectible Manager a method, but it's going to be a public method. It'll be type void, and it will be called add to collection. Okay, and then two parentheses, two curly brackets. So there's our public custom method called add to collection. We're also going to need an integer called collection count, and we'll set that equal to 0. You'll start with 0 cubes, right? And actually, let's make this public for now. So in order to add to our collection, we just want to take collection count and set it to collection count, so whatever collection count was before, plus 1. This is called iterating. So iterating means just increasing by 1. So now, when we pick up a collectible, well, actually not yet, but when we run the add to collection method on our collectible manager, it's going to increase the collection count by 1. So if we go back to collectible, now in order to tell our collectible manager to do anything, we need a reference to it, right? We need a property. So let's say public collectible manager is the type, because a class is a type, is a script. And we'll just call this manager. Okay? So before we set this game object to false, let's tell the manager. So that's it. We can reference this collectible manager by typing manager, because that's the name we gave it. Manager dot, and there's the top selection is add to collection. I can start typing it. So enter, and then in order to call a method, just like set active, we need our arguments, our parentheses, which there's no arguments to go in the parentheses, so we don't have to put anything in there. Where set active requires a boolean. Add to collection, because we created it, doesn't require any arguments in it. Okay, so let's test this out. So if we go back to Unity, so let's click on our cube. Oops, close that. So this is going to be our collectible, so let's add our collectible script to it. So click add component, search for collectible. Now it needs a collectible manager set to it. So we can't drag this in, so we can't just drag the script in. We need to create an object which will keep track of our collectibles. So let's create an empty, because this will just name it collectible manager, and this will just be this empty invisible game object. We can even set it to 0. 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 1, 1. It's nothing. But it is in charge of keeping track of our collectibles. So let's click add component, search collectible manager. So here's our collection count. Here's our collectible. Now what's the one thing this collectible needs still? Oh wait, apart from this, so now we can drag our collectible manager onto there. Our collectible needs to have a trigger, right? So I'm going to leave the box collider. I'm going to add component sphere collider, SPH sphere collider, and let's zoom in on that collectible. So that sphere collider is too tiny, so let's increase its radius to 3. So now when the player enters that sphere collider, if we set it as trigger, we should pick it up. So let's keep an eye on our collectible manager here. So there's our collectible. Keep an eye up here. Ding. and it's gone. So now our collection count is 1. Now in a real game, oh, here's our key. Oops. See, by making that trigger bigger, it makes it easier to pick it up. So in a real game, the player can't see the Unity stuff, right? They can only see what's in this game screen. So we want to let the player know how many collectibles they've picked up. And so we're going to do that with UI. And so in order to add UI to our game, we first need to add something called a canvas. So we're going to go to Create, UI, and Canvas. Okay? So here's our canvas, and a canvas also comes with something called an event system. These are both really important, so we just want to keep those. But so a canvas is just a way of it's basically it's this big white box. So if you double click on canvas, it's going to center on this big white box. It's way bigger than our level. But a canvas is just a way of displaying whatever's in this box and whatever's childed to canvas on our game screen. So first thing I want to do really quick though is instead of using constant pixel size, we're going to do scale with screen size. And that way, if we change the shape of our window, you can see it's getting smaller and getting bigger. Okay, and that's just going to be really helpful later on, so our stuff doesn't get messed up. So in order to add stuff to our canvas, we can, with it highlighted, you can go to Create, UI, and we're going to add text. So you can see here in the middle of our canvas it says New Text. You can see that text is childed to canvas, and if we click on Game, now our new text appears. And the thing about a canvas that's cool about it is if we hit play, the text stays where it is. Okay, so it's a HUD. It's our heads-up display. It's our user interface. So instead of saying new text, we're going to change this to collectible label, and we're going to have it say number of cubes collected with a colon. Okay. And so notice how it went on to another line. We don't really want that, so we'll just increase the width until it fits. And actually, let's make the width 300. So you can see the width is actually this outline, and the text goes in it. Let's make the height not 30, 100. Let's do 60. And now we can so with the collectible selected, we can actually move it. So we move it down, move it to the left, move it down to the bottom corner of the screen, right? You can also do some settings. So I'm going to set its alignment to the center. So this is its horizontal alignment. So see how it stays in the center here? This is its vertical alignment. You can set a text color, which I'm going to leave it black. You can set a font size, which I'm going to set to 24. Oops, no, 20. Yeah, I'm going to set it to 20. So now, if we go to our game, we see we have this big number of cubes collected, and we also need a text box to display the number of cubes collected. So let's duplicate collectible label, rename it to collectible counter, and let's delete the number of cubes collected from it, change it to 0. Okay? And so if we move this over, you can see the 0 is right there. Now I want this to be left aligned and centered, so that we always have a consistent space between these two things. So I set it to left align, move it over. Maybe I'll make the font on this a little bit bigger, so 22, 24. Okay, so now if we check our game, number of cubes collected 0. So now we need to update this. And so we're going to update that in our collectible manager, right? So like here, we're going to go from the collectible to the collectible manager to the UI. So in our collectible manager, I'm back in Mono Develop in our collectible managers. Oops, I'm on our collectible script. I'm going to go to collectible manager. Right now we have this method, add to collection. So when we add to the collection is a great time to update the UI. So in order to do this, we need a reference to our collectible counter text component here. Okay, and so in order to reference that, we actually need to import a library. So remember these up here, how we don't do anything outside of the class? Well, now we're going to. We need some more code. So we're going to say using Unity engine.ui. Okay, and that's going to give us all the code related to UI, because most of the time we don't need code related to the UI, but when we're making a UI script, we want it. So in our collectible manager, we're going to add a reference to the text. So public text count text. Okay, so we have our text. It's called count text. Now I want to show you this because when we reference another component, another script, see text here, its properties are below it. So when we click, if we start typing, um, count text and hit period, we have like our alignment, we have our canvas color, depth, font size, font style. And so if we look here, alignment, color, font style, font size. So we can all change. We can change all these things through code. But the thing we want to change is the text. Okay. So this is looking at the component is a good way of thinking about the things you can change in your code. So we want to change the text. We want to change what the text says. So we're going to say count.text or count text dot text. And you'll see the text appears. It's a string. Okay, so a string means words. So when we say equal, we're going to say equals collection count. Now, collection count is an int. Okay, the fancy thing about C#, or one of the nice things, is most things can be converted to strings by just saying dot to string. Okay, so collection count to string. As an example, we can say count text dot to string. Now, I don't know what count text to string would get translated to, but I do know that collection count dot to string will just turn this number. Will turn 0. It'll turn 0 into 0 in quotes, right? And that's a string. That's an int. So let's delete all that. Leave our semicolon. Okay, so when the add to collection method gets run, we're going to say collection count equals collection count plus 1, and we're going to say the text, the count text dot text equals the collection count to string. So we're going to turn that number into a word. So the final thing we need to do is I'm going to close this canvas on Collectible Manager. Oops, I need to open that again. We're going to take the collectible counter and drag it into our count text here. Okay, so now if I hit play, we can walk. There's our collectible. Bing, 1. Great, right? So actually, we don't need this. We don't need this value public anymore. So I'm just going to delete that because you don't need to edit how many collectibles you've collected in the inspector. And let's check our collectible really quick. Everything. I'm gonna give you all this. Yeah, so everything looks great there. Everything works here. Yeah, so that's collectibles. Thank you very much.